So I'm Jeremy at Lynne's Organic Farm. We've got a mixed small holding of about 40 acres in East Sussex. So we have a special chicory mixed ley, predominantly chicory but also some red clover, rye corn and herbs. We use that as a green manure, but we also use it for a cover crop for pigs and for chickens. Yeah, we have pigs, we've got laying chickens, and we do mixed fruit and veg. We've had the chicory ley for about 10 years, which I developed with Cotswold Seeds. We started off as with no livestock, so we were just using straight green manures, but we wanted to develop a green manure which would give some benefit to livestock, i.e. some nutrition to both the pigs and the chickens, and that's how we came up with this mix. We purchased the farm about 20 years ago. This plot many years ago was part of the Abergavenny estate. It was then rented, and I think there were cattle and sheep grazing on here. It was just straight pasture. It was then kept by someone who didn't really farm. There's never been residential dwelling on this farm until we took it over. So yeah, this is the first time it's really been a complete agricultural holding. This mix was developed so it would give nutrition to predominantly pigs but also chickens. The chicory in particular has very good benefit for the pigs and has, we've found, substantial benefits for sow fertility. So we've noticed when sows have grazed in green manure before going to the boar, their litter size is substantially bigger than if they don't. It also seems to help with boar fertility, because all of our breeding stock are now elsewhere and their fertility appears to have gone down somewhat. They're not on this ley, so I don't know. We've had this ley with breeding stock for about 10 years and that's what we found fairly conclusively. So, because we're organic, obviously we have quite a lot of weed. What we tend to do is flail mow a couple of times before it gets established, and then we just let it grow. Depends on how long we're going to keep the ley, but we will probably mow once or twice a season. So this crop here will be mowed in a few weeks and we'll just see how we get on. Basically, we don't really want it going to seed. We prefer the bulk, but yeah, it depends on the season and the weather. So we graze both laying hens and pigs on this chicory mix. We treat it slightly differently after both have been on the mix. So what tends to happen with laying chickens is that they don't destroy the root structure. So we will leave the mix to come back and regrow. We'll incorporate it eventually, but we don't resow immediately. With pigs, obviously we have to cultivate once they've been through the green manure and then resow or plant veg, depending on what's happening in that particular rotation. Like I said, when chickens have been in on the green manure, we will let it regrow and we won't reseed. There are certain areas of the farm that we have specifically for livestock, and then there's certain areas that are specifically for fruit and veg. We're now standing in the main veg field, so by virtue of it being through a rotation, we're going to be turning over whether it's cover crops or veg much more frequently. We try and leave it for 2 years if we can. It just depends on what's happening with the rotation, and it depends on what's happening with the weather springtime. So if we say we need early potatoes in and we've allocated a plot and it's too wet, we'll have to move that to a dry plot. So that we just have to play it by ear, but generally we'll try and leave it for at least 2 years in the veg plot, longer in the other plots. So after the laying hens have been in the chicory ley, what tends to happen is that the ley will regrow and you'll get the chicory coming through first. I'm guessing because the tap roots are so much stronger than all the other roots in the mix. What we'll do is just wait for it to grow maybe a foot, and then we'll just top it, and then you'll start to get the rest of the mix come through. We'll let it grow to another maybe a foot, top it again, and then you'll probably get the same mix as we had originally. We tend to terminate the ley in two instances. If it's been planted in an area which is growing veg in the following year for rotation, and also in another field if pigs have been through the area, we need to resow. So generally in the veg field we'll be turning over and terminating the ley quite frequently. In the areas allocated to chickens we tend not to, but then where the pigs have been, then obviously we're turning it over and resowing. But generally with the pigs and the chickens we're trying to keep the ley in for about 3 or 4 years before we're then terminating and resowing. Breeding sows, we do tend to get massively increased fertility when they've been in the green manure prior to going to the boar. We don't really have any issues in terms of worms or any other type of sickness. That might be luck, it might be to do with the green manure. I don't know. We do have herbs mixed in with the green manure, which obviously will have some benefit. And I always think that this is going to be a lot more beneficial to both types of livestock than just plain pasture. The only real issue we have with chicory, if it's been incorporated occasionally, is in potato plots. And that's because you're cultivating and then planting the potatoes quite early season. So the green manure might not have completely broken down by the time you're planting your potatoes. And obviously when you're planting potatoes, you're ridging, which is bringing some of the chicory back. So when we're then weeding the potatoes, you can get quite a lot of chicory, but it's not a bad weed. It's weird. We tend to get the ryecorn issue more in root plots and brassica plots, which are later. Don't ask me why. But not so much of the chicory problem in the later plots. We planted all of the orchard and the soft fruit when we purchased the farm. It was a blank canvas, and we had the second green manure still growing when we planted the orchard and the soft fruit, but that's now just sort of mixed into the pasture. Maybe in hindsight we would have planted, before we planted the orchard and the soft fruit, we may have planted something that may have lasted for a very long time and could have been suitable to grow in that area, but hindsight's a great thing. So what we do find is that there is a variance in how the green manure takes and grows depending on soil condition throughout the farm. So we've got a sandy loam throughout the farm, but the composition of the soil does vary, and you'll see here the green manure takes and different parts of it grow better depending on which parts of the farm we are. So we've got a bit here that is probably a lot better conditioned soil than the stuff right in front of me, which isn't, and is also probably near a natural spring. We do have quite a lot of natural springs throughout the farm. So this would have been wetter, this would have been drier, and this less nutritious. And what we've got here is mainly the rye corn growing, and everything else isn't growing so well. And behind me, the chicory and the clover are growing much better. We've been customers of Cotswold Grass Seeds for about 20 years. Pretty much ever since we've been growing green manures on the farm. When we first bought the farm and we were in organic conversion, we put the whole farm down to green manure. So I got to know Ian quite well early days, just seeking advice and what we should plant for those 2 years. And then ever since then we've been just re-sowing. We like dealing with Cotswold Grass Seeds because they're very knowledgeable, very prompt, If there's an issue with any seeds in your mix, they'll try and replace them if they can. Delivery's great. Really never had a problem.